Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English, and we turn now in our hymnals to pages 1 and 2 and 3 as we introduce ourselves now to unit number 1, which is again going to be introducing us to fiction and nonfiction study. And again, the big question, there it is listed on page 2, is there a difference between reality and truth? Also, I want you to pay attention to the vocabulary work that's on page 3, just to remind, just like in our freshman year, obviously a whole lot of the assessments have to do with our success in knowing this vocabulary, so we're going to be paying attention to that. Hey, take a look at page 4. I'm not going to read through all of this with you. I know it's already been assigned for you to look at on your own. I'm just guiding you here. Let's talk about the elements of fiction and nonfiction real quickly in our notes, right? Fiction, let's get a definition. Author tells of imaginary characters and events. Nonfiction, author discusses facts, general ideas. Notice your comparison of the two in the box down at the bottom of page 4. Notice your major forms of fiction on page 5, short stories, novels, subplots, novellas. Notice your major forms of nonfiction, functional texts, literary nonfiction, and then we have examples with bullet points of each of those. Under functional text, notice reports, newsletters, online reference sources. Under forms of literary nonfiction, personal narratives, autobiography, memoir, journal entry, biographies, essays of a certain kind, all of those will fall as well. Go ahead and go look at page 6 really quickly. We're going to spend time determining theme in fiction, insights, messages about life. Level 2A, yes? Level 2A for our annotative approach. Often these will be suggested through words, actions, and of course the fate of a story's characters. There's implied theme, as page 6 will tell us, right? Where we take a look at characters' actions, experiences, the implied theme, right? There is different interpretations of themes, and they'll give us some examples as well from the Christmas Carol, the great Dickens story, right? On page 7, determining central ideas in nonfiction, the central idea is the work's main idea. We of course often call it a thesis, right? Let's put that in our notes, supported by its details. We'll have the central ideas, the thesis statement, the author's purpose, central ideas to inform or to persuade or to entertain. They give us some examples of this one down at the bottom of page 7. Also the development of central ideas and the topic sentence, the power of the topic sentence, and again they give us some examples of that one as well, okay? We'll do close reads of different texts now to kind of set ourselves up to this. Let's go to work with that one. Notice the literary elements as clues to theme on page 8. We've got the title. We're always paying attention to titles. Sometimes they're self-evident. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is clearly a book about Tom Sawyer. Most Dangerous Game, now hearkening back to our freshman year study, Most Dangerous Game, we don't know anything about what that title means until we've studied the text. And then of course after we've studied the text, often titles will have multi interpretations, right? So the title matters to us, setting matters to us, the symbolism matters to us. You can see that there at the bottom left corner in the chart on page 8. Statements and observations, obviously characterization, conflict, and plot also will matter to us as well. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to look at several models. The first one we're going to look at is Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Then we're going to jump to Susan Vreelander's Magdalena Looking, which you can see is going to run from pages 10 up through page 19. Then we're going to come back to take a look at the central idea in nonfiction. We're going to have a model there again from Gwendolen. This is A Quilt of a Country. And then finally Artful Research as well by Vreeland on page 23, culminating on page 26. So we're going to take a look at several models now, all right? And we're going to pay attention to the ways in which your textbook company is helping you to learn how to annotate or to read. Let's pay attention to the first model on page 9, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. We will read this novel usually in our sophomore year as a full novel. Hopefully this will just kind of set you up to it. Bradbury's 451. Fahrenheit 451. I'm just reading with you on page 9. A work of science fiction published in 1953. The novel is set in a future totalitarian society that burns books to which the government and special interest groups object. These include classic works of literature as well as religious texts. The Fahrenheit 451 of the title is the temperature at which books will burn. Bradbury's concerns in the novel were shaped by contemporary events, World War II, and pitted the United States against Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, where censorship was routine. After the war, fear of communism led some Americans to scrutinize each other's for dissenting political beliefs. Persons suspected of disloyalty might find his or her career ruined. At the same time, television gained popularity. By 1954, over half the households in the United States had a television set. In the background of Bradbury's novel then is a time when ideas were considered dangerous and television was beginning to take the place of reading. Now, this is a cutting from Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Notice that you've got some, again, little comments made. Do you see it on page 9? Number 5, statements. Number 6, symbol. Number 7, setting. And notice we've got some color coding even going on. Just listen to the beautiful, horrific language of Bradbury. It was a pleasure to burn. I'm reading with you now on page 9. I hope, Conquer Monkey Mind, follow along, pen tip or pencil tip at the word. Let's make sure we can keep up with the reading. Right? The issues of fluidity. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see them blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with a great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet, numbered 451, on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house, while the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montag, grinning the fierce grin of all men, singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he would wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never, ever went away, as long as he remembered. Now notice at number 5 we've got statements. Bradbury ironically compares the hands of Montag, a destroyer, to the hands of a conductor who creates something beautiful. The passage suggests that the theme concerns both creation and destruction. Notice the symbolism of the helmet, recognizing or symbolizing Montag's job to destroy books and the knowledge and dissenting opinions they contain. And finally, at number 7, the setting. The action takes place on a porch and lawn, which adds horror to the scene. Montag is attacking an ordinary house. Notice your theme at number 8 at the bottom of the page. The following themes are suggested in detail in the text. 1, humankind has the drive to destroy as well as to create. Censorship is driven by a passion for destruction, and violence and ignorance go hand in hand. All right, let's turn now to a more independent practice. Take a look on page 10. Do you see that number 10 and that number 11 in those boxes? Do you see those question marks? It will be your job as student to answer those questions as we go through this reading. Look on page 11, 12, 13, more of the same. Then on to page 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You'll notice these questions. So as we go through this longer reading of independent practice, that is our goal. Now let's talk a little bit about this text, Magdalena Looking. The selection is an excerpt from Susan Vreeland's novel, Girl in Hyacinth Blue, a work of historical fiction. The main character is Magdalena, a fictional daughter of artist Johannes Vermeer. Vermeer himself, from 1632 to 1675, was a real person, a famous painter who dwelt in Delft, a city in the Netherlands during the 17th century. Now, what we want to do is we want to now read along, okay? We'll pay attention, obviously, to these boxes of questions, beginning, of course, with the title, Magdalena Looking. And again, our challenge is to conquer monkey mind, to pay close attention to our reading as we go. Here we go. Let's pay attention now. The professional reader will be reading for us, Magdalena Looking.
Magdalena Looking, from Girl in Hyacinth Blue by Susan Vreeland. Late one afternoon, when Magdalena finished the clothes washing and her mother let her go out, she ran from their house by the new kirk across the market square, past Van Buiten's bakery, over 2 cobbled bridges across the canals, past the blacksmiths, all the way to Ketelstraat and the town wall, where she climbed up and up the ochre stone steps, each one as high as her knee, to her favorite spot in all of Delft, the round sentry post. From that great height, oh, what she could see! If only she could paint it. In one direction, Schiedam Gate, and beyond it the twin towers of Rotterdam Gate, and ships with odd-shaped sails the color of brown eggshells coming up the great Schie River from the sea. And in another direction, strips of potato fields with wooden plows casting shadows over the soil like long fingers, and orchards, rows of rounded green as ordered as mother wished their 11 young lives to be. And the smoke of the potteries and brickeries, and beyond that she didn't know. She didn't know. She stood there looking, and behind her she heard the creak and thrum of the south windmill, turning like her heart in the sea wind, and she breathed the brine that had washed here from other shores. Below her the Schie lay like a pale yellow ribbon along the town wall. The longer she looked, the more it seemed to borrow its color from the sky. In the wind, the boats along the Schie docks, with their fasteners clanking and their hollow bellies nudging one another, made a kind of low, rattling music she loved. It wasn't just today. She loved the sentry post in every kind of weather. To see rain pocking the gray sea and shimmering the stone bridge, to feel its cold strings of water on her face and hands, filled her to bursting.
Page 11.
She moved to a notch in the wall, and just then a gust of wind lifted her skirts. The men on the bridge, waiting with their bundles to go to sea, shouted something in words she did not understand. She'd never tell Mother. Mother did not want her going there. The sentry post was full of guards smoking tobacco, Mother had said. There was some dark thing in her voice, as though she thought Magdalena should be afraid. But Magdalena did not know how to feel that then, or there. Up there, high up above the town, she had longings no one in the family knew. No one would ever know them, she thought, unless perhaps a soul would read her face, or she herself would have soul enough to speak of them. Wishes had the power to knock the breath out of her. Some were large and throbbing and persistent, some mere pinpricks of golden light, short-lived as fireflies, but keenly felt. She wished for her chores to be done, so she'd have time to race to the town wall every day before supper, or to the Oude Kerk, to lift the fallen leaves from her brother's grave. She wished her baby sisters wouldn't cry so, and the boys wouldn't quarrel and wrestle underfoot, or run shouting through the house. Father wished that too, she knew. She wished there were not so many bowls to wash, 13 each meal. She wished her hair shone flaxen in the sunlight of the market square, like little Hartroides. She wished she could travel in a carriage across borders to all the lands drawn on her father's map. She wished the grocer wouldn't treat her so gruffly when he saw her hand open out to offer 4 guilders, all that her mother gave her to pay the grocery bill that was mounting into the hundreds, as far as she could tell. She wished he wouldn't shout. It sent his garlic breath straight into her nostrils. The baker, Hendrik van Buten, was kinder. 2 times so far he let Father pay with a painting so they could start over. Sometimes he gave her a still warm bun to eat while walking home, and sometimes he put a curl of honey on it. She wished the grocer was like him. She wished Father would take the ice boat to the Schie more often. He'd bought a fine one with a tall ivory sail. 80 guilders, Mother grumbled. Better a winter's worth of bread and meat. On winter Sundays, if the weather was clear, and if he was between paintings, it whisked them skimming across the white flats of the canal. She'd never known such speed. The sharp, cold air blew life and hope and excitement into her ears and open mouth. She remembered wishing, one particular morning, when Father mixed lead white with the smallest dot of lead tin yellow for the goose quill in a painting of Mother writing a letter, that she might someday have someone to write to. That she could write at the end of a letter full of love and news, "As ever, your loving Magdalena Elizabeth." He painted Mother often, and Maria he painted once, draped her head in a golden mantle and her shoulders in a white satin shawl. She was older, 15, though only by 11 months. It might be fun to dress up like Maria did and wear pearl earrings and have Father position her just so. But the only part she really wished for was that he would look and pay attention. More than all those wishes, she had one pulsing wish that outshone all the others. She wished to paint. Yes, me, she thought, leaning out over the stone wall. I want to paint. This and everything. The world from that vantage point stretched so grandly. Up there, beauty was more than color and shapes, but openness, light, the air itself, and because of that it seemed untouchable. If only the act of wishing would make her able. Father only smiled queerly when she told him she wanted to paint, just as if she'd said she wanted to sail the seas, which of course she also wished, in order to paint what she would see. When she said so, that she wished to paint, Mother thrust into her hands the basket of mending to do.
All right, let's pause for a moment and write it down at level 1. Magdalena looking begins with, notice, setting. So she takes a look and she sees all the amazing stuff that she can see. And yet, very quickly, we get to the real heart of this cutting. And it is what? Well, Magdalena has a dream, a longing, a wish. What is that wish? To be like her famous painting father, an artist. Of course, there's a problem. Magdalena is a girl, a young girl, right? And because she is a young girl, she is given the duties of what? Domesticity, taking care of the house, washing lots and lots of bowls. Did you notice it? Did you see it on page 11? The number of bowls that she has to wash? 13 each meal. In other words, her job is to do the garbage job that nobody really wants to do. But she wants to have a different job. She wants to be like her father. Now notice now, we're going to watch a little bit of Magdalena watching. She is a watcher. And we're going to pay attention to the ways in which, right, she longs to be like her father. Let's go ahead and jump really quickly to 3b. Already we're trending towards this obvious question. What is the thing that you long the most for, you wish the most for, but at this moment in your life anyway, it hasn't happened for you? And you wonder if it ever will happen for you. Let's keep reading now. Pay attention.
Often from the edge of the room she'd watch him work. Because he was always asking for quiet with little ones running through the room laughing or shouting, she didn't ask him many questions. He rarely answered anyway. Still, she studied how much linseed oil he used to thin the ultramarine, and watched him apply it over a glassy layer of reddish brown. By magic, it made the dress he painted warmer than the blue on the palette. He would not let her go with him to the attic, where he ground lead tin yellow to powder. But he did send her to the apothecary for the small bricks of it, and for linseed oil. Always there was money for that, but she didn't know what to answer when the apothecary demanded the guilders for her brother's potions still owed after he died.
Page 13.
If only she could have colors of her own and brushes. She wouldn't just paint pictures of women inside cramped little rooms. She'd paint them out in marketplaces, bending in the potato fields, talking in doorways in the sunlight, in boats on the ski, or praying in the Ouderkerk. Or she'd paint people skating, fathers teaching their children on the frozen ski. Fathers teaching their children. The thought stopped her.
Key line.
Looking from the sentry tower at a cloud darkening the river, she knew, just as she knew she'd always have washing and mending to do, that it would not be so. She'd worn herself out with wishing and turned to go. She had to be home to help with supper. On a spring day that began in no special way, except that she had climbed the town wall the afternoon before, and all over Delft lime trees lining the canals had burst into chartreuse leaves, and light shone through them and made them yellower except where one leaf crossed over another, and so was darker. On that spring certain day, out of some unknown, unborn place, came that scream, "I hate to mend!" She shouted to the walls, to Mother, to anyone, "It's not making anything." Father stepped into the room, looked at Mother, and then scowled at Magdalena. It had been her job to keep her little brothers quiet for him, or shoo them out of doors, and here she was, the noisy one. No one moved, even the boys were still. At first, she looked only at Father's hand smeared with ultramarine powder, not in his eyes, too surprised by the echo of her voice to fling out any additional defiance. She loved him, loved what he did with that hand, and even, she suspected, loved what he loved, though they had not spoken of it. When that thought lifted her face to his, she saw his cheeks grow softer, as if he noticed her in his house for the first time. He drew her over to the table by the window, brought the sewing basket, placed on her lap her brother's shirt that needed buttons,
or page 14.
Adjusted the chair, opened the window a little more, then less, and discovered that at a certain angle it reflected her face. "If you sit here mending, I will paint you, Magdalena, but only if you stop that shouting." He positioned her shoulders, and his hands, resting a moment, were warm through the muslin of her smock and seemed to settle her. Mother rushed over to take away Hartroida's glass of milk. "No, leave it, Katharina, right there in the light." For days she sat there, still as she could for Father, and yet sewing a few stitches every so often to satisfy Mother. In that mood of stillness, all the things within her line of vision touched her deeply. The tapestry laid across the table, the sewing basket, the same glass repoured each day to the same level, the amber-toned map of the world on the wall. It plucked a lute string in her heart that these things she'd touched, grown as familiar to her as her own skin, would be looked at, marveled at, maybe even loved by viewers of his painting. On sunny days, the panes of window glass